What if intelligence isn't a fixed trait you're born with, but a living process, constantly shaped by how you experience the world? What if the roots of our understanding, the way we learn, solve problems, and see reality, are not taught by others, but built by us, piece by piece, like a child stacking blocks? You're a builder of thought itself, but about the architecture of human understanding, how we come to know what we know, how intelligence is born, evolves, struggles, and finally transcends. Now imagine this. You're not simply a thinker, witted to open a secret door, one that reveals the inner laboratory of the human mind. This isn't psychology as usual. It's not wrapped in therapy couches or lab rats. This is philosophy in motion, theory of growth. A roadmap of how children and all of us move from confusion to clarity, from raw instinct to abstract thought. This is the haunting brilliance behind the psychology of intelligence, a masterwork by the legendary Swiss psychologist Jean Piaget, a book not about IQ scores or mental tricks. Jean Piaget didn't write this book to impress academics. This book matters because it flips the story of intelligence. It says intelligence isn't a static gift. It's a living adaptation. A story of how thinking is born and how, through it, we become fully human. A creative force. It grows through mistakes, through trial, through discovery. The moment you understand that, the moment you truly grasp how your own mind constructs knowledge, you will never look at learning or yourself the same way again. So let's dive into a story not just of theories, but of transformation. At the heart of the psychology of intelligence lies a simple yet revolutionary idea. Intelligence is not something we have, something we do. From the very first pages, Piaget draws us into a world few have dared to map, the world of the growing mind. But this isn't just about children, it's about all of us. Instead, he asks, how do you come to know anything at all? It's a subtle but seismic shift. Because the way a child learns to crawl toward understanding mirrors, the way we all confront the unknown. Assimilation is when the mind fits new experiences into old frameworks. Accommodation is the opposite, when the framework itself must change to absorb something new. It's not about right or wrong answers. It's about how we adapt to a world that never stops challenging us. Whether you're a scientist chasing truth or a parent raising a curious child, Piaget's theory places you on the same road, the road of adaptation, construction, and evolution. In these early chapters, Piaget doesn't lay them out in the rigid way you might find in a classroom. Instead, he weaves them into a narrative, a gradual unfolding of how thought becomes more sophisticated over time. He describes how children don't just absorb facts. They invent understanding through interaction, through action, through experience. The child learns by touching, grasping, tasting, watching. Cause and effect become the earliest teachers. Her baby shakes a rattle and learns the sound comes from motion. She drops a toy again and again, learning about gravity not from a book, but from doing. This is knowledge born from action. Like all blueprints, they must be revised when reality doesn't match the design. The child begins to use symbols, words, images, play. Language explodes, but logic is still missing. The child may believe the moon follows them home. They begin to understand seriation, the ability to arrange objects in order, such as smallest to largest. They're building it from within. And this idea, this constructivist model of intelligence, is the heart of Piaget's brilliance. They begin to grasp conservation, the idea that quantity doesn't change just because appearance does. This is the slow awakening of concrete logic. We actively build it, and in doing so, we build ourselves. Or that a tall glass has more juice than a short one, even if both hold the same amount. It's a magical, imaginative world, but not yet a logical one. That's assimilation. The child already knows dogs have 4 legs, so this creature must be a dog too. Every error was a window into the architecture of the mind. He doesn't treat logic as a cold, external system imposed on the mind. He treats it as an internal construction, slowly formed through interaction with reality. Not in a selfish way, but cognitively. They simply can't yet see the world from another's perspective. A child may cover her eyes and think you can see her, because she can see you. But when the child is told it's a cow, not a dog, the mental category must stretch, evolve. That's accommodation. To begin, Piaget lays a foundation that is both biological and philosophical. He doesn't ask, "How smart are you?" It's about building better structures of thought. He introduces two key processes: assimilation and accommodation. These are the twin engines of intelligence. Imagine a toddler who sees a cow for the first time and calls it dog. And it's here in this constant dance between fitting in and adapting that Piaget finds the soul of intelligence. He then introduces the concept of schemas, mental structures that organize our knowledge. They are the invisible blueprints of understanding. Piaget shows us how even the youngest children are not passive learners. They are little scientists, testing, failing, learning, rebuilding. This leads us to his groundbreaking idea of stages of cognitive development, a theory that has influenced education, psychology, and even parenting for nearly a century. First comes the sensory motor stage, from birth to around 2 years old. Here, intelligence is entirely rooted in physical experience. Then emerges the pre-operational stage, roughly from 2 to 7 years. Piaget shows us how children at this stage are egocentric, and yet this stage is not inferior. It's essential. It's a necessary step in the construction of thought. As Piaget guides us through these stages, a subtle truth begins to emerge. Intelligence isn't about learning more facts, and building takes time, struggle, frustration, failure. Piaget was fascinated by the mistakes children made, not because they were wrong, but because they revealed how the child was thinking. By the middle of the book, Piaget starts turning the lens on the broader idea of logic and how it emerges. The child begins to form classifications, grouping objects by size, color, or shape. But even then, the child isn't mimicking adult logic. He's telling us that we don't passively receive knowledge. By the midpoint of the psychology of intelligence, a powerful picture is forming. Intelligence is not a score, it's a journey, a structure, a story. This story is only beginning. As we cross the midpoint of the psychology of intelligence, Piaget invites us deeper into the labyrinth of human thought, beyond the world of simple logic, into the realm where reason takes flight. Now the child enters the concrete operational stage, typically from ages 7 to 11. Here, thought becomes more logical, more organized, but still tethered to the tangible. The child can now conserve volume, understand reversibility, and classify objects by multiple characteristics. They can begin to see others' perspectives, compare ideas, test possibilities, but only when they can tie those ideas to something real, something they can touch, see, or imagine in concrete terms. But then, somewhere around the age of 11 or 12, something extraordinary happens. A new world opens. The child transitions into what Piaget calls the formal operational stage. This is where true abstract reasoning awakens, where thought becomes capable of imagining what might be, not just what is. Now they can construct hypotheses, debate ideals, think about justice, love, ethics, and existence itself. When we encounter something new that doesn't fit our current schema, we experience disequilibrium, a kind of cognitive dissonance. It's uncomfortable, confusing, but it forces us to adapt, to grow, to revise. Formal operations require more than age. They require environments that challenge, provoke, and nourish thinking. It is the pulse of intelligence. Not perfection, not certainty, but dynamic balance. A balance that is always shifting, always seeking. The first is drawn from interacting with the physical world. Second is drawn from reflecting on our own thoughts. This distinction matters because true intelligence, Piaget argues, isn't just about learning from experience. It's about learning from thinking itself. Some remain rooted in concrete thinking their entire lives, never pushed to construct the scaffolding of abstraction, and builds new frameworks, is stepping into the true power of intelligence. He writes of how human thought moves toward greater abstraction, greater integration, and deeper understanding, not just of the world, but of the self within it. Metacognition, self-awareness, mental construction. The child becomes a philosopher, a scientist, a dreamer. This is the threshold where the human mind begins to explore its own infinity. But Piaget doesn't romanticize this evolution. He knows that many never fully cross this threshold. He calls us to see intelligence as an evolving system, in constant dialogue with the world. And this is where Piaget's ideas begin to ripple outward, beyond the child, beyond the classroom, into culture, education, and society itself. He argues that teaching must not be about telling, but about provoking, creating the conditions where the learner must adapt, question, and rebuild. He begins asking bolder questions. What is intelligence for? Is it merely to survive, to solve problems? Or is it something deeper, an equilibrium between the individual and the world? Here Piaget introduces one of his most profound concepts, equilibration. This is the engine behind intellectual development, the constant tension between the comfort of what we know and the challenge of what we guarantee. This is learning at its rawest, most human level, and it's not just for children. Every time we face a truth that threatens our worldview, every time a belief cracks open under the pressure of evidence, we are in the process of equilibration. Piaget then explores the difference between empirical abstraction and reflexive abstraction, two very different ways we learn. In other words, the child who begins to think about how they think, who questions their own conclusions, revises them by the final chapters. Piaget's work reads almost like a philosophy of becoming. He challenges the idea that intelligence is simply solving puzzles or making calculations. He warns us, too, that the danger of modern education is treating knowledge like a product to be delivered rather than a structure to be built. And in his final reflections, Piaget touches the core of something spiritual. He speaks of intelligence as a bridge between instinct and reason, between the biological and the symbolic, between action and thought. And as the book closes, one message becomes unmistakably clear. To know is to act. To think is to construct. And to be intelligent is not to be right, but to be ready. Ready to learn, to adapt, to rebuild. Again and again. That is the story of intelligence. That is the story of us. At first glance, The Psychology of Intelligence seems like a book without characters. There are no heroes, no villains, no familiar narrative arcs. Not one specific child, but the universal child. The thinker in all of us. The curious toddler stacking blocks. The 7-year-old asking why the sky is blue. The adolescent questioning justice and mortality. This character is evolving, searching, adapting. It's always in motion, always building. But if you look closer, really listen between the lines, you begin to see them emerge. The patient guide, K, a man who watched hundreds of children think, speak, and solve problems. Not to measure them, but to understand the architecture of their minds. He wasn't concerned with IQ or grades. He was fascinated by how knowledge is born, by the invisible mechanisms that turn sensation into understanding. A silent architect within the human brain. Intelligence, in Piaget's world, is not a fixed trait. It's a journey. At the heart of every cognitive shift is a tension between what we know and what we retrying to understand. Piaget believed that intelligence grows not from ease, but from disequilibrium. When our current understanding fails, we are forced to evolve it. This cycle, breakdown, confusion, reconstruction, is not a flaw in learning. It is learning. A process of constructing reality, brick by brick, from the raw materials of perception and reflection. Piaget reminds us that intellectual development is not linear. It spirals. It pauses. It loops back before it moves forward. Understanding this is key, not just for educators or parents, for anyone who has ever felt slow, stuck, or uncertain in their growth. Intelligence unfolds at its own rhythm. Every rhythm is valid. The unknowns. The quiet, sacred space where thought is born. The main character is the child. It's not a number, it's not a trophy, and it's certainly not about being the fastest or the best. It's about how we respond when our current understanding no longer fits. It's about how we face the unknown, how we construct meaning in a world that constantly changes. And Piaget himself becomes another kind of character, the silent observer. Because real learning, the kind that transforms you, always begins in discomfort. And through that, start growing deliberately, intelligently, endlessly. Piaget views intelligence not as the ability to store facts, but as the ability to adapt to new situations. It's a mirror, one that reflects how we, as human beings, come to know the world and ourselves. When the child confronts a challenge they can't immediately solve, their mind either assimilates it into an existing structure or accommodates by building a new one. This dynamic is central. It is not comfort, but disruption that fuels growth. But perhaps the most haunting character of all is intelligence itself. Every click helps us bring more powerful stories like this to life and keeps the wisdom flowing. Thanks for being part of the journey. It's not as a score on a test, but as a living, breathing force. And the journey of this intelligence follows a recurring rhythm, a pulse that forms the core themes of the book. We are builders. Every time we learn, we are not just remembering. We are constructing meaning, shaping reality from within. One of the most powerful is adaptation. Another theme is constructivism. The radical, empowering idea that knowledge is not received, it is built. We are not vessels into which information is poured. And then there is the theme of equilibrium. Lastly, the theme of time runs silently beneath it all. One of Piaget's most memorable quotes captures this beautifully. Intelligence is what you use when you don't know what to do. That line cuts deep. Because in a world obsessed with right answers, Piaget gently points us back to the questions. He reveals how all of us evolve. In the end, The Psychology of Intelligence is not just a book about childhood development. Jean Piaget doesn't offer easy answers. He doesn't give you tips or tricks or hacks to be smarter. What he gives you is far more powerful, a new lens. He shows us that intelligence is not static, but ever unfolding. This book will challenge you. It will slow you down. It might even frustrate you, but that's the point. If you're a teacher, this book will rewire how you see your students. If you're a parent, it will change how you listen to your child. If you're a thinker, someone hungry to understand the roots of your own mind, then this book will feel like standing at the edge of something vast and quietly powerful. Jean Piaget spent a lifetime watching children think, so that we could finally start thinking about thinking. So ask yourself, are you ready to let go of the comfort of what you know? Are you willing to embrace disequilibrium? Because that is where growth lives. If this story moved you, challenged your thinking, or simply sparked your curiosity, then don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.